damn Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is somehow against the anti-lynching legislation that was passed. All right? President Biden signs a bill, says, hey, bad thing to lynch people. Good bill, should have been passed a long time ago. Primarily Republicans blocked it. So it's finally signed into law, bad thing. You cannot lynch people, all right? It has been used as a target and methodology against black folks for decades in this country, and truly more, all right? More than decades. So Ben Shapiro puts his foot in his damn mouth. Here it is.
It's happening all the time. Really, it's not a relic of the past. I'm gonna read you the statistics on lynching in the United States. You ready? Here's some actual statistics compiled by the University of Kentucky. Okay, here we go. Here are the lynchings by year and race. 1882, 64 white people were lynched, 49 black people were lynched. I mean, one of the great untold stories about lynching, of course, is that there is racist lynching. There's a lot of non-racist lynching as well, right? There are white people who are lynching other white people for various crimes. So 1886, in 1885, for example, 110 white people were lynched, 74 black people were lynched. Okay, but in 1898, you had 101 black people who were lynched, 19 white people lynched. And these numbers they're horrifying, obviously. I mean, these are evil crimes, what we are talking about right here. Grand total, I'm just gonna give you the total, because at a certain point, basically once you get past maybe 1909, pretty much everybody who's getting lynched is black.
Yeah, that's why we have an anti-lynching bill, Ben. The bill that you were obviously against because it was used to target black people. You disproved the premise of your own proclamation. I know what happened to Ben here. Ben thought he had something, all right? Ben thought, hey, my conclusion is right. Let me start with my conclusion and give you the stats, because I just know, even though I have not read none of this damn data that I'm giving you, it is going to say what I said in the beginning. And it did not. He looked foolish, okay? Do your homework, Ben. That's how you come prepared. According to the NAACP, lynchings were public acts that white people used to terrorize and control black people in the 19th and 20th centuries, particularly in the South. Lynchings typically evoke images of black men and women hanging from trees, but they involved other extreme brutalities such as torture, mutilation, decapitation, and desecration. Some victims were even burned alive, all right? Let me give you some stats directly from the NAACP. From 1882 to 1968, 4,743 lynchings occurred in the US, according to records maintained by the NAACP. Other accounts include the Equal Justice Initiative's extensive report on lynching. Count slightly different numbers, but it's impossible to know for certain how many lynchings occurred because there were no formal tracking systems. Many historians believe the true number is completely unreported or underreported. Black people were the primary victims of lynchings. 3,446, or about 72% of the people lynched, were black. But they weren't the only victims of lynching. Some white people were lynched for what? Helping black people, or for being anti-lynching, okay? Immigrants from Mexico, China, Australia, and other countries were also lynched. In a 2021 piece about modern day lynchings for the Friends of National Legislation, lynching still exists today when police use lethal force to harass, harm, and kill black people. Lynchings have shifted when African Americans like Breonna Taylor are shot to death by police while sleeping in her bed. Lynching still exists today when 28% of those killed by police in 2020 are black people, despite being only 13% of the population. Now, let me tell you what our dear brother Ben Shapiro suffers from. He suffers from white privilege, okay? It is a disease, preventable, but he chooses to take no steps to prevent it. You see, anything that sees itself or anything that reveals itself as being pro-black, well, typically pundits like Shapiro and others, they must take an opposition stand to it. These are the same people, many of them, who opposed black holidays, right? Juneteenth, okay? So the reality is this, The data pans out. Ben Shapiro was incorrect in his assessment. His conclusion was a violation of the facts, and we wanted to expose the reality that the anti-lynching bill was a good bill to pass. Now, they didn't campaign on that. I must add this caveat. They campaigned on things like the George Floyd Policing and Accountability Act. They said we would get criminal justice reform. They said that we would get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. All right, I need these things. This is what you put on the resume, President Biden. We hired you based on what you put on the resume. It's great that you're doing these other things that were not part of the resume, but you put in a resume and we expect you to deliver. Ms. Khan, thoughts here?
I had to watch that clip a few times because I was like, what is he saying? What point is he trying to make? Why is he trying to make that point? But it just goes into, he clearly was trying to make a point that feeds into the narrative that racism is not a real thing in this country anymore, at least not the way it used to be. But then he obviously didn't do his research. And as he's reading these things, it was very clear to him and to everybody listening to him that the point he's trying to make is simply not supported by the data, right? And even still, anti-lynching is still anti-lynching, right? Unless he's like trying to make a case for equal opportunityism or something like that. But it's still a good bill to have, even though it's targeting or it's benefiting, I should say, one demographic over another, and that's a demographic that he seems to believe is not being targeted the way that they actually are, even though there's so much evidence to support the fact that they actually are. Maybe he was making an argument against, government inefficiency. Maybe he's saying we didn't need to waste time passing something like this because it's not a real problem. I don't know. I don't watch Ben Shapiro's show, and I'm not going to because at some point you have to protect your own mental space. But I like what happened though on air live with him. That was fun.
That was interesting, and Republicans, conservatives, they spend a lot of time talking about and passing legislation that solves no problem. For example, critical race theory, okay? Critical race theory is virtually not taught in K through 12 education, but it has become a great boogeyman. And here's the only test you need to apply to test the proclamation I just made. In the bills that are passed that are promoted as anti-CRT or anti-critical race theory bills, none of those bills possess the language critical race theory. They possess other language in the bill because the legislature, these Republican dominated legislatures, are not passing a ban on actual critical race theory. They're passing legislation to hinder school teachers from teaching actual history if it relates back to a racial context. And the reality, Ms. Khan, is that the genesis of all of these bills have nothing to do with school teachers. School teachers did not lead this. You didn't see advocacy groups for school teachers or school teachers coming up saying we need to pass this legislation. We are taking cues in education from politicians, primarily Republican politicians, and then they are silencing school teachers from speaking out against the legislation that's being passed.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about government inefficiency, there are so many arguments that can and should really be made. And the CRT example is a great example of that because it's not a real thing. We know it's not a real thing, but they keep pushing it. And the more you say something, the more people believe it and the more people get afraid of it. So even if it's not a thing, they're like, well, maybe it will be one day. So there is an argument for government inefficiency, but this is not it. Whatever Ben Shapiro was trying to do, and that's giving him the benefit of the doubt, by the way, that is what he was actually trying to argue, but we all know that probably wasn't his goal.
Yeah, Ms. Khan, he just effed up, that's all.
Yeah, that's what it was.
He messed up. All right, to my television, cable, linear audience, I bid you farewell. To those that are watching via streaming, we are continuing the program.